Welcome to the Center of Light Radio with spiritual teacher, intuitive, musician, composer, and best-selling author of The Divine Principle, Anchoring Heaven on Earth, your host, Keith Anthony Blanchard.
Coast to coast, pole to pole, all around the world on the internet. Thanks to the marvel of technology, I'm coming at you live from a little guest house in Memphis, Tennessee. This is Keith Anthony Blanchard. You're listening to Center of Light Radio, Center of Divine Unfoldment and Reinforcement, radio for the soul and the transformation station. Strap in all my brother and sister astronauts as we launch for inner space. I want to give a quick announcement that Swamiji Viswayogi is going to be here like the third week of September. Swamiji Viswayogi is a God-realized man from India. I had the blessed opportunity to interview him 3 times. And when you're standing in the presence of someone that's a powerhouse like this, it consumes everything around you. And the information you get on multiple levels, multidimensional levels, get really rich really quick. So stay tuned for that interview. I will give more details on the next couple of weeks as we get closer to that interview with Swamiji Viswayogi. Listening audience, listen up. This is what Center of Light Radio is about. I've been doing some research. I got an email some time back from Heather, my guest tonight, and Alan, asking her to be a guest on Center of Light Radio. And I recently done some research, and I listened to one of Heather's presentations, and let me tell you, I was floored. I was wild. This is what Center of Light Radio is about. This is why I do what I do, is so I can be able to do what my guests tonight do. It's about having those divine, mystical experiences that helps to amalgamate one in unity consciousness with God. And I'm sure you're going to be absolutely blown away like I was the other day when I did my research. So we're going to get right down to the show. In other words, it's time to get down to Center of Light Radio business. Heather Giamboi and Alan Feldman have practiced an advanced form of soul projection for over 20 to 30 years. In this interview, they will discuss a true ancient extraterrestrial past life and how ancient ET spiritual elders and saints taught their students through a spiritual apprenticeship how to master intriguing galactic and spiritual soul projection to the planes, dimensions, planets, and heavenly universes to become God-aware spiritual masters themselves. You can find more about my guest tonight at www.soultravelagent.com. Heather and Alan, welcome to Center of Light Radio.
Nice to meet you, Keith.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. And if everyone would, if you hear a fan noise in the back, it's because of my phenomenal guest, Mr. Alan Feldman. Has to have this going on. So what I would invite you to do when you feel the time is right is go inside and send him some love and light. That's what we're about as well, right? So I guess I'm going to start with Heather. Ladies first. Heather, how did you come across this doorway? Was it via Alan, or were you guys both designed to meet as to why you're married? Just give me the intro, how this all began for you, at least.
Well, I would say that when I was a young adult, I felt deep inside, I felt very old. Even though I was 17 years old, I felt very old. And like I was tired of this world, tired of, the rat race, and that something was missing, and I didn't know exactly what that was. But I started reading tons and tons of books, anything I could get my hands on. But still, no matter what I read, I felt like something was missing. And finally, one day, like a couple of years later, I broke down and cried, and I said, God, if there is a God, show me a real teacher. And I was spiritually guided to change colleges. And I immediately went to their library, closed my eyes, and said, what am I ready for now? My hand touched a book. And the moment my hand touched this book, I had a flash of an out-of-body experience where I experienced this luminous, brilliant white world of nothing but light that went on forever. And I knew I found exactly what I was looking for, which is out-of-body projection. And on my journey, of course, I met Alan in a way that was no accident, and we began to compose a book together about our out-of-body experiences. I've been doing out-of-body travel for over 20 years, and he has for over 30 years. And when we started writing our book, at one point when we hit chapter 3, both of us, we just had this sudden flash of what are called the soul records on the soul plane, which is the soul plane is a plane that is far, far beyond the lower levels of heaven, far beyond duality. And we were shown this past life we both shared together a long time ago, millions of years ago on a very ancient planet. And it was very profound, very moving what we saw. We saw in great detail about our spiritual lives and some profound spiritual truths that we both learned in that particular past life. It was on a planet called Ceres.
So Heather, let me ask you this. Let's go back just a little bit. How did you, even though you met Alan and you began to write this book, what began to launch you to have these out-of-body experiences? Obviously, before you got on your metaphorical spiritual knee and cried out to God, because I did the same thing, and believe me, I came from a space like you of such passion and sincerity. It happened. But when did the out-of-body experience, or in-body rather, these glimpses of divinely realms, when did this happen and how did it happen? Did Alan teach you this? Alan, was this something you imparted to Heather and she began to have her own?
It's very contagious. No, I'm kidding. No, she had her experiences before she met me in this lifetime.
Yes.
So what is a technique that you guys use to help launch you into these different dimensions and planes and bandwidths?
Sure. Who wants to? Heather,
you can talk about it, Alan.
Well, oh boy, there's a few of them. If you'd like, we could share a couple with your listeners and yourself.
Would love that.
That would be great. One of I just wanted to. Do you mind if I say a little bit? I'd like to say that part of the problems with most paths or most groups is it's based upon dogma or superstition, or it's based upon what somebody read in a book. And that's fine. I mean, it's not a bad thing, because you can get a lot of insights from reading and listening to lectures and stuff. But the thing is that you, without having your own personal experiences, as you alluded to, Keith, really, it's sort of like just out. It's sort of in your head. You know, it becomes dogmatic. It becomes like a religion or superstition or beliefs.
Yeah. You
know, most people have all these beliefs that they carry around with them. And so the big thing that separates, one of the things that separates Vardankar from it's not a religion, first of all, is that we show it's a path through personal experience, and it's not limited to the astral plane. A lot of paths that talk about astral projection or mental travel, we've actually mapped out these different planes. And this, we didn't do it.
How is that even possible?
By
to
actually
map
going on
out
the trip. I mean, if you look at the ancient explorers, you know, like Magellan and Christopher Columbus, and how did they map out the world? Well, before the advent of satellite systems and high altitude aircraft, it was done the old-fashioned way. You know, it was hard. You had to travel, and as you traveled, you'd have people that would scribe down maps, and so this has been the case for forever, is that there's people that are spiritual travelers who've been able to go into these various planes, and they've existed before time, before the Earth, on these different planets, different planes, and these are the spiritual travelers who've gone to different planes, and they've mapped these out. It's very exciting. So it's not a dogmatic path where you're told something and you're told to have faith and believe it. It's something where the spiritual travelers come and they tell man what's out there and how to reach it, but then you have to have your own experiences and your own mythology. And so Vardankar is the ancient science of out-of-body soul projection. In other words, it's a science. It's an applied science where you actually practice it. So there are exercises you can do in addition to reading and studying, and that's where the proof is in the pudding, to have these actual experiences. And what you find is that they are mappable, that you can, through the help of the spiritual travels, you can figure out where you are.
So is there an exercise that you can share that you think might help?
Yes, because I'm over here wringing.
Actually,
I'm over here wringing my hands, waiting.
Oh yeah. There's a couple of them. I mean, there's a lot of exercises, but I'll give you a couple of real simple ones, and there's a reason why I'm giving you at least two. The first one is sort of like getting the nut crack open. It's a basic technique. It's not an advanced technique, but it can it's sort of like if a bolt is all rusted shut and you can't get it open, you sort of like have to hit it with a hammer a few times and maybe spray some oil on it. You know? So if somebody's kind of stuck in their body or they're kind of in a rut, this is a simple exercise. It's not very advanced, but it works really well. And it's simple exercise. I'll if you want, anybody that wants to practice it, they can do it right now. So what you basically do is, hopefully if you have a chair, you sit down and notice the room you're in. Like, notice behind you, like the furniture and everything around you with your physical eyes. You take a look at it. And then you close your eyes. And now what you do is you imagine a point about 4 feet behind your head, and you jump in the soul body to that point. So you're looking behind yourself in your physical body. So you
deliberately project yourself to that focal point.
Right. So now you're looking behind your head, and you just put your attention that area behind your head, almost like a TV camera. And what you can do now, there are ways of making it easier. You can chant the word hue, which is pronounced like hue is in the color hue. And the way we usually do it is we'll do the H separate. So we'll go H and then draw out the U. So it's spelled H-U. And so you might close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. And then you chant H-U. And then you can do that a few times, 5, 6 times, 7 times, whatever feels comfortable. And then you can try jumping out of your, jumping to this point about 4 feet behind you, and you'll see your physical body to the back of your head. Now at that point, you're out of your body. You're not that far out of your body, but you're out of your body for sure, because you placed your attention there. And now from there, you can hover up above the ceiling, look down. You can visit. You can go someplace in the physical world. You can meet a particular master. So that's sort of just an exercise to get you loosened up.
And one of the significances of learning soul projection or more advanced form of out-of-body travel is that its purpose is to actually return to God, to actually return home to God. So we're not doing it just for entertainment or, for some frivolous thing of that nature, but the purpose is actually to return to God and to spiritual freedom.
Right.
This is a weird kind of understanding, but 99.8% of souls in the lower worlds, including Earth and other planets, are not spiritually free. But the illusions are so powerful, like the movie Matrix. They're so incredibly
My
powerful.
absolute favorite movie.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Good movie.
Because it's such a perfect analogy for the way the spiritual matrix in the lower worlds act.
Guess what? Hollywood, I'm here.
Hollywood's got a new host, and the stars are shining bright on Steve.
It'd be okay to just come here every day for that.
Today, Premiere Week continues with Ice Cube. Plus, baseball's rally granny makes the crowd go wild.
You've never seen anything like this before.
All new Steve.
New York, weekdays at 2 on NBC4, New York.
Actually behaves it.
What's interesting? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
What's interesting about the Matrix? Yeah, we like it a lot too. Is that if you notice in that movie, Neo goes through this paradigm shift, and he realizes the unreality of of this illusion. But it's like he jumps into another paradigm, but he's still under illusion. It's almost like you're in a tiny closet, and then you leave the closet and you go into a bedroom. So you've expanded your freedom, but you're still in a bedroom and trapped in that larger matrix, so to speak. And this is the nature of these different planes, is that they get bigger and bigger. You have more and more freedom. It's less and less matter and more spirit, but it's still a prison cell. It's just a bigger prison cell. And so one of the things we learned in Vardankar is when we map out these different planes, and we have a chart that kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about. If you go to the Vardankar website, VARDANKAR, vardankar.com, you'll see a chart that shows, these different planes. And so you can, once you start to understand that there's no real common language amongst people that are into spiritual subject matter or metaphysics, or people that are into metaphysics, or they're into religion, or they're into New Age, different paths, astral projection, whatever you want to call it. There's no common language, and so there's a lot of confusion. But once you start to understand how it works, how these different planes are like traps inside of traps, kind of like a prison. You have the cell that the inmate's in, but then when he gets out of that, he's in the courtyard. But then when he gets out of that, it's like walls inside walls inside walls. And so somebody escapes their prison cell, but they're still in the prison.
It's still on prison grounds, right.
Yeah. So they really haven't escaped the prison. They've escaped the cell. And then, of course, they find them.
It almost reminds me of like an onion that has different layers. You brought this analogy up before where, like in the Matrix, he wakes up from one layer and then he finds himself in another, but he feels like he's totally woken up. In a sense, that happens a lot to souls.
That could be a dangerous trap, that when one thinks they're actually liberated, that they just get complacent and they stay and play on this particular plane for however long. Until
it could be thousands of years.
That's exactly what happens, actually, and it happens to countless souls. It's just like the Matrix. In the Matrix, he in a sense is almost like waking up to astral consciousness. The astral plane is like the invisible world. When people develop psychic abilities, suddenly they can see this invisible world, and they're like, "Wow, I woke up." But what a lot of people don't realize is that they've woken up to like the first layer of the onion, and it's so beautiful and profound, and they can see angels and they can see heavenly sights and wonders, but there are many layers to this sort of onion or matrix.
And what makes it even more complicated is similar to the physical plane. For example, in the Earth, let's take something really tiny like the Earth. We have different experiences on the Earth. Like you could be in Hawaii and you could be lying in a hammock, or next to a waterfall, and you could feel like it's just amazingly beautiful and serene and happy. Or you could be in the middle of a desert, in a war-torn desert where you've got machine gun fire, and it's hot, extremely hot, and barren, and just very unpleasant. And yet those are all parts of the Earth. And so the astral plane has many sub-regions, you see. So it gets complicated. So there's a spiritual law, which is that a spiritual master, cannot take his chelas or students any farther than he has actually gone himself. So if you're studying with a teacher or guru or master, anybody like that, if they haven't reached beyond, let's say, the mid-astral plane, it's going to be able to take you further than that.
There are many people that will have these incredible experiences in the astral plane or the mental plane, and it'll be so profound that they will think that they reached God realization or self-realization, when it's sort of like they've reached sort of like an astral enlightenment or a certain experience on one of these subplanes. But it's sort of like a journey, and that's why we found it vital. We've worked with these very ancient masters. Just like we learned on Sirius, there were these ancient masters millions of years ago, and they would take their students under their wing as sort of like a spiritual apprenticeship and teach them this galactic and spiritual wisdom. of learning, the process of learning to leave the physical body and dwell in these heavenly planes and dimensions or realms and universes. And so it's a whole process of spiritual unfoldment, because the goal is to graduating from reincarnation,
spiritual liberation,
and to achieve a very high level of spiritual liberation where the person doesn't have to reincarnate anymore unless they want to. And they become sort of, you could say, a direct agent of God or a direct co-worker with God. And it's significant because these ancient masters, like the ancient masters I've spoken of about Planet Ceres, they work one-on-one with their students and sort of like teach them all of the different steps of unfolding themselves spiritually.
And it's a process. It's a difficult process. I find it kind of amusing that people recognize that anything that's difficult takes a teacher. You wouldn't want to say you want to be a brain surgeon, but you're going to learn it on your own. I mean, anybody who has any kind of intelligence would say, well, maybe I need some people to help me learn brain surgery. So you're looking at something that's it's the most difficult thing anyone will do, is to reach these higher states. It can be done in a single lifetime, but it's certainly not something that's as easy as, let's say, learning to play the guitar or learning to sing or learning to play piano.
Well, I can tell you, learning to play guitar took me many years.
Exactly.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you guys a question. I have stepped in these arenas quite often in my life, not so much at will, and that's why I'm really passionate and hanging on every word that you are saying, both of you. I remember I was conscious, I was lucid, but I was in a castle, and this castle felt something like, it had a dark, luminous feel to it, and these two beautiful, naked, voluptuous women were trying to seduce me. And when I scanned them from toe to head, they had a cat-looking face, and it didn't feel right. And I start to walk away, and they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going outside." And they said, "You don't want to go in the sun. The sun is going to burn you." I said, "That's exactly why I'm doing it." So, so when I walked outside, I began to feel this purifying fire. It burned, but it wasn't painful. And I blacked out. I found myself laying on my back in a meadow. And when I opened my eyes in this meadow, there was a very tall cross. And I remember, and keep in mind this was in black and white, and probably implying my past. And I begin to do this sit-up type crunch thing, and I yelled out this one long drone mantra, and the word was love. And I did that sit-up crunch, and as I did that, I can hear, oh my God, I can hear God. And everything from my past ever spoken, everything ever heard in one of my ears, just passing by very fastly. And in my third eye, I saw images since the beginning of my life to that point. And I left my body, I went through a wormhole, and when I got out of this wormhole, I was in an absolute void. And in this void, even though it was dark, I can see because it was my awareness that was illuminating this void. And I was prompted to look above me, and I did, and there was these 12 angels. Now, I don't know if they were very, very tall and far away, or if they were average size and somewhat close, but they begin this maypole dance in this circle kind of thing. And then they swooshed off, and in their swooshing, I was pulled into the current. And I was brought through layer, through layer, through layer, until I stopped. And when I stopped, I knew, and it wasn't Keith imagining or contriving, I knew this is what we call the Godhead. And the reason I stopped is because I'm the one that had a thought. My thought is what stopped me. It's what separated me from it. But anyway, they gave me a glimpse. And when the curtain was pulled back, oh my God, the only way I could describe it is kind of like in the Matrix 2. Do you remember when they were in the caverns and they were doing that tribal dance of celebratory, and it felt just like that? And they said, "Keith, you're welcome to come in here." And in that moment, I chose not to because I wasn't per se afraid of physically dying. I just knew that my identity, everything I thought was right, wrong, good, bad, hot, cold, that was all just going to be shattered. And I wasn't quite ready for that. So would you both say that doing the exploration that you do, not only does it help alleviate one's identity to the body and physical death, but it also creates a fire, a passion for cosmic life?
It actually, what you just said is significant. It creates, when you shift just out-of-body travel to actual soul projection with the masters, you shift to this burning desire to return to God, we call Hure. And this desire sort of is like a fire. We call it like the holy fire of God. And it creates such a profound and deep feeling of love for all life and for God that one feels compelled like a rocket to work towards that goal, to study, to learn, to leave the physical body. It's not necessarily an easy thing to go through the spiritual tests or testing that is required to move to the higher levels. And yes, ultimately it is out-of-body travel. The whole entire purpose is to unite with the Godhead directly into the ocean of love and mercy, which is a world of such great luminosity and light and sound that it is very profound. When somebody reaches that point, they reach what is called God realization.
But I have to add that
Sure.
It's not so much. It's deceiving because you never lose your individuality.
Right.
So you become a conscious coworker. So it's deceiving because a lot of people, when they hear unite with the Godhead, they think in terms of nirvana, or they think in terms of what they call cosmic consciousness. But this is way, way beyond cosmic consciousness, where you become passive. This is something where it's indescribable, but you become this conscious agent, and you maintain your individuality, and yet you have the realization of God. You see the face of God, which of course is not male nor female.
I use
and
the
it doesn't
analogy
have a
often.
physical
Alan and Heather, I use the analogy often when I do talks about out-of-body travel, or not necessarily out-of-body travel, but who you really are. And we can liken this to looking at the hand, our physical hand. We see ourselves as separate, and we're individual fingers on the hand, but we see ourselves as separate because we focus on the empty space in between the two. But in truth, what we really are is we all each a knuckle that is connected to the whole hand, which is God in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, we're just an extension of the wholeness, and then we get to I guess it's called, I might be mistaken, the divine ego, where we actually have an identity, and we still can maintain our connection to the source, and then we express it down on the physical plateau. Yes.
Oh yes, that's a good way to put it. I like the analogy of water in the ocean.
Oh, absolutely.
And that it's really one of the secrets to the whole thing is surrender, and becoming. Humility is a difficult thing because you have to empty your bucket. It's sort of like, imagine a 5-gallon container, or imagine a glass, and I come to you and it's filled with dirty water that's old and smelly, and I say, fill my glass. Well, the first thing you're going to say is, well, dump the old water out, because there's no point in you dumping fresh, clean water into a glass that's already filled with dirty water, because you're just going to dilute the dirty water. You're not going to, it's not going to help me to drink water that's half dirty. And so until we're willing to be humble and empty our cup of what we believe we know, what we think is truth, that until we have that humility, we're always in this position of the ego being in conflict with the Varden, which is the Holy Spirit. Now, this Holy Spirit appears as light and can be heard as sound, the sound current, or the audible life stream. And it's very important because there's a wave that issues out from the Godhead, or the ocean of love mercy, that issues out. And this is a wave that consists of sound and light. And it sustains and creates everything. And so we can grab back onto the returning wave. There's a wave that comes down that sustains and creates. And then there's a returning wave that returns back to the Godhead. And we can grab onto this returning wave.
Guess what, Hollywood? I'm here.
Hollywood's got a new host, and the stars are shining bright on Steve.
It'd be okay to just come here every day. for that.
Today, Premiere Week continues with Ice Cube. Plus, baseball's Rally Granny makes the crowd go wild.
You've never seen anything like this before.
All new Steve.
New York, weekdays at 2 on NBC4, New York.
And ride it through the soul projection. I think Heather you wanted to say something?
Yeah, what it is the living Varden Master, or the Mergatma, the Sinner Master, connects or links the student with this returning sound wave that returns to God. And there's also another thing, too, and not many people know about this. There are different people that will have experiences of they'll say, I had an experience with God, or I had an experience that was in a very high place. But one of the things that a lot of people don't know about is on these different planes, each spiritual plane has a sort of transformer or power matrix that acts as a transformer or lowered vibration version of you could say God, like
it's a ruler.
And then that ruler has so much light and power and energy that people will mistake these different rulers for God, because they'll see it and it looks like a tremendous light and it will have so much love or so much power to it. And on each of these spiritual planes is something of that form, only at a higher vibration with more spirit and less matter the higher you go.
Everything is about vibration.
I've learned a lot of this by I just moved into a house and I went to the attic to see what was up there so I can clear it out to put my stuff in it, and I found a box, and in this box was a book by Paul Twitcher called The Tiger's Fang.
Oh yeah, excellent.
And oh my God, I love that book. I read it 3 times consecutively, and he described exactly that on every level. There is someone in the seat that governs what happens on this dimension. We're at the bottom of the hour. Center of Light Radio. My guest today is Heather Giamboi and Alan Feldman. Would you please give out your contact information of all sorts so our listening audience could find out more about you and your powerful work, helping people to return to source?
www.bardankar.com. And I should mention that there's a long lineage of masters, and Paul Twitchell was actually one of the Varden masters. And prior to him, there were other masters. And Alan, who we're speaking to on this call, he is actually the current living Varden master.
It's a temporary position.
Yeah.
Bro, just being honored with the accolade of the position is validation, I think.
That's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this.
One of the greatest books ever written.
Everything you guys are describing, I've experienced from the higher realms, even to the earthly realms. I had a friend of mine some years ago, my spiritual mentor, who kind of whispered some metaphysical things in my ear when I needed most in my life. He put me what's called through a rebirthing session where you breathe like mad. And then you do this for an hour or however long it takes. And I find myself vibrating, oh God, like I'm plugged into a generator. And I black out for like 30 seconds. And then I come back and I didn't have any experience whatsoever. And I assumed that I just fell asleep for 30 seconds and I woke up. The next day, I go to a nightclub where I was playing music and a friend of mine walks in and it all comes back. I was in her car looking down on an event, her wiping her seat with a white towel. I was at the dome light consciously. And I called her over to me and I explained to her I was in your car last night. She goes, Keith, you weren't in my car last night. She goes, I was with my boyfriend. I said, well, I was in your car last night. She said, how so? And she said, this is one of those weird spiritual things. I said, please play this out with me. It's important. She said, okay. I said, I saw you wiping your seat with a piece of white material, and I named what she was wearing and all these different things. And, of course, her face is starting to drop. And Tammy is the person, everywhere Tammy goes, she drives. She's never the passenger. But also, how often are you the passenger in your own car? It just so happens that day at 5 o'clock when I had this experience, she left the window open in her car that night before it rained. She said, Keith, the white towel's still in my back seat. He was the one driving my car. And yes, I was wearing these clothes. And that solidified something in me. I had another layer of freedom via that experience many years ago in my life.
Yeah, these experiences can be very dear to us. What we find eventually is we learn to die daily. And it's not that we're dying, it's not that we're dying literally in the sense that, our heart stops or anything like that. But we're dying in consciousness in going into these other states. And then we return to the body, because all of this exists simultaneously.
Right.
As I'm sure you figured that out.
Yeah.
that this is all simultaneous. What it gets a little confusing is I'll say, well, you go here or you go there. He's like, well, if I go there, then I'm not here anymore? Like, doesn't my heart stop, or isn't there danger that I'm leaving my body now? You know, who's going to watch my body? You know.
Yeah,
and,
I've heard all those stories and those myths. Yeah.
Yeah, and then people always did.
Sorry.
Oh.
Part of the process is that the Varden masters, when they work with students in this spiritual apprenticeship, they bring them through a series of different kinds of spiritual experiences that happen progressively at a higher level of spiritual plane. So when someone is first starting, they might begin by visiting the astral plane, of course under protection, because I wouldn't advise out-of-body travel unless you're studying with somebody who's truly God-realized and truly knows how to protect you. And they might start by visiting the astral plane, and there's a temple of golden wisdom that different Varden students will visit on the astral plane. Then when they advance...
Oh, mention the name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, can tell us.
Yeah, the names of the different spiritual planes. Like, for example, on the astral plane, there is a temple called Asclepios. And the master there is Gopal Das. He was the master during ancient Egypt.
And you can see some beautiful drawings of these masters if you go to the Varden Car website.
And then above the astral plane, when students advance and have more out-of-body experiences there, eventually they graduate the astral plane to the causal plane, which is the plane of the Akashic records, the plane of memory, where you start to have flashes of past lives. And they study at the Sakapuri Golden Wisdom Temple with a master named Shamas Tabriz. And then above that, I forgot to say colors, like the causal plane has a golden orange light. And then above that is the mental plane. There are some people that do, instead of astral travel, they do mind travel, but we use the soul body. And there, students will visit a temple of golden wisdom called Namyatan. And then above that is the etheric plane. Now, all of these planes are sort of in the lower worlds. The higher you go, the more incredible and brilliant the light, and the more high vibration it is. In fact, each plane feels so high that it feels like you've reached the ultimate, when in fact it's still in the worlds of reincarnation, the lower world.
Wow. When you're out there, in there, when you're inside of yourself and you're treading over these different dimensions, I'm going to assume something. I'm going to assume that there's an automatic knowing that happens between these different planes. When you came from one and you went to the other, let's say you guys hit a new plane that you've never been to before, or new experience. Immediately, I would think that there's a knowing that begins to happen of what's happening here, what this is, where you are, who's the head of it. I mean, is there a knowing that is encrypted with each place you go to?
It's funny that you say that, because knowingness, when a person is, like, for instance, they're in the causal plane, they have this intuition that is so close to the soul plane that it feels like a knowingness where you're in touch with soul. But knowingness is the faculty of soul, which is your pure, true self, a spark of God that has no lower bodies, no astral body, no physical body, no mental body. It's just pure soul. And with knowingness, you don't even have to think about it. You just know something as spirit. It's just natural to you. And knowingness comes from these, true knowingness comes from the soul plane and above. And so when a person actually goes beyond the lower worlds I just described into the God worlds, which are the worlds of total awareness and pure freedom, where you are omnipresent, on those worlds you have knowingness, you have beingness, and you have seeingness. In other words, you're totally aware. And that knowingness, when you listen to the knowingness instead of your mind and your beliefs, the knowingness will show you how to take the steps you need to take to move towards God instead of more reincarnations.
If you'd like...
Go ahead, Alan. Go ahead.
Another exercise.
You just read my mind.
For fans. Whenever you're ready.
You just read my mind. That's what I was going to
interject. The first one was more of a beginner's exercise, just to put your big toe in the river. So yeah, Keith, just let you know, whenever you're ready for.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely ready. And then I would like to move on, if you guys would. We could talk maybe a little bit about your past life experience on Sirius.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm ready for this exercise. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, it would be really helpful if your listeners had the God Loves chart in front of them. If I don't know, not everybody's on the can surf the net while they're listening to your program, but if they can, they just go to vardankar.com, VARDANKAR.com, and they'll see a chart on page 1. There's a more complicated one, but that should be sufficient. And it says the God Heavens Worlds of Vardankar. So I don't know if they found that yet, but this will be helpful. But anyway, you find that chart. You can print it if you want. And what we're going to do is we're going to chant the word Hu, which is an ancient name for God. Should I just walk us through the exercise? It's a little more complicated.
Sure. Yeah, just walk us through.
So what we're going to do is we're going to chant Hu, and then we're going to chant the names, the sounds, or the words for these different planes, and we'll just move up in vibration. So it's a simple exercise, but this is much more advanced, but you don't really have to know what to expect in order to do it, because you're tuning into the sound. So you don't have to have an idea what you're doing. It's sort of, you just simply follow directions. It's like making a souffle. Just do what the cookbook says on the souffle.
Right.
You don't have to know what eggs are or any of those stuff. So, okay, so first thing we do is we sit down. If you can't sit down, you can lie in a bed. It's better to sit, but, back straight if possible. Relax and take 6 deep breaths. Preferably do this in a quiet environment. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to chant Hu, like we did before, Hu, just for a little while. And then we're going to pause and we're going to go on to the next plane. So we're going to basically chant Hu, and then we're going to go to Alai, which is the physical sound, and then Kala, which is the astral sound, and then we're going to chant Mana, which is the causal, and then we're going to chant Om, which a lot of people are familiar with. That's the mental, and then we're going to chant Baju, which is the etheric, and then we're going to chant Hure, which is each letter individually, and that's the soul plane, and then we're going to chant Shanti, which is the 6th plane. So that should be enough to get your feet wet for sure. So here we go. I hope this isn't too long an exercise, but we'll make it brief, if that's okay. I don't want to. Okay, so we take a few deep breaths. H U H U Alai 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 Kala. We're now on the Kala. Kala. Mana. This is the causal. Mana. Mana. Om. We're now on the mental. Om. 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 Baju. This is the etheric, it's the high mental. Baju. 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 Now we're going to move to the soul plane. H-U-R-A-Y Q-ray H-U-R-A-Y. Now the sixth plane. Shanti. 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 Q H U Q. So that was sort of a speeded up version of it. Obviously, you do it longer.
So what is a person to expect or not expect to have happen? I'm sure this is like any sort of muscle, spiritual muscle, that it takes time and practice to begin to exercise this aspect of ourselves for it to expand. Would that be true?
In general, however, anything can happen.
Well, what you're doing is you're learning how to place your awareness and attention in a particular place or vibration. And when you place your attention there, for instance, if a word resonates with that vibration or that plane, and you're chanting it, some people will begin doing this, and then they will start to become conscious of that particular plane. They might begin to see a certain color of light or hear a particular type of sound, or they might actually, experience seeing this heavenly world and certain things, like they might, if they're on the astral plane, they might suddenly see the astral museum or whatever it is that comes to them. But by learning to place our attention there, we're learning to consciously travel there, and it's a process of unfoldment.
These mantras, calling out these different names, these are basically like golden keys unlocking golden doors, right?
Exactly.
Love it. Years ago, I had an experience. I was out and about, in and about, and when I came to a state of awareness, this angel had me in her arms, it, flying down this street, and everything was consumed by this purple fire. And I knew it wasn't a destructive fire. I knew it was a divine fire. All the buildings were firing ahead of us. And I look over me to see who's carrying me, flying with me, or flying me. And it was an angel, and it had the Prince Valiant type look. I'm sure this is something my mind concocted to help me understand what was happening. But he kind of nods for me to look in front of where we're going, and there's this huge tree, bigger than any tree I've ever seen in my life, and it's full of this purple fire. And he basically smiles and sends me a message. We're about to fly into this thing, Keith. And so we flew into this tree, and I find myself in a high-rise building, multiple times higher than the most highest building on Earth. And we on the top floor, and all the walls in this penthouse were made of glass, and you could see everywhere. You can even see the curvature of the earth. And I'm so giddy because I can float and play in the ceiling and in the material walls. As I begin to ascend into the ceiling, the angel pulls me down by grabbing my leg and sits me on the sofa and pats on the sofa. Here you go, Keith, sit here. And the phone rings, and he looks to me and he says, "Aren't you going to answer?" I said, "What do you mean answer?" He goes, "Keith, you actually live here." So this was a multi-dimensional experience of another life of mine. So I wanted you guys to talk a little bit, if you can. We have about, 9 minutes.
Oh.
Tell me about your experience in your other life with the, and Alan, was that something that I triggered on you that you wanted to say at the moment?
Oh, no, not at all. That's just something you can try at home if you want.
Oh, by all means. By all means.
We were surprised that 10 minutes is left.
Wow, it went fast.
Right? Time's an illusion. And I believe it or not, I'm buzzing over here.
You want to talk about the series life?
I can start. Basically, what happened was when we were writing our book, and we reached the 3rd chapter, we both had this profound flash of seeing what are called the soul records, which is the heaven of self-realization. The soul records are completely different than the Akashic records, and they're much more complete. And so we saw ourselves in this lifetime. In that particular life on Planet Sirius, Alan was 800 years old, which on Sirius, they have completely different lifespans. So 800 is like a 24-year-old.
Right.
And in that particular lifetime, I was like about 4,800 years old, which would be someone in their 60s. And we were both practicing the same exact thing that we're practicing now. It was Vardankar, except it had a different name back then. But the purpose of it was we studied in this particular lifetime on this planet Sirius. It's a planet that has 2 luminous suns, and it was a golden age, so much more positive. And so we would have these meetings.
You forgot to mention the most important thing.
Oh yes.
Well, you were the master back then.
Yes.
You got the
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, in that life I was the living garden master. And the purpose was to teach the students to become masters themselves, that they could reach this state called Jaivan Mukti, which means graduating from reincarnation.
Spiritual liberation.
Yeah, so they could graduate from reincarnation and the Wheel of 84 by learning this form of soul projection.
Why is it called the Wheel of
physical body.
84? What is the significance of 8 and 4? Is it
boy,
because you
this will
add
probably
8
blow
and
you
4
away.
and it's 12 and it's a 4 number? Is that right?
This might seem a little overwhelming or even scary, but the 84 implies 8,400,000 lives, I believe, reincarnations. There are
it's years.
Wow.
Yeah, years. Sorry.
But basically, it's you go through all the signs of the zodiac. One of the things we teach is don't identify with your present incarnation as far as your personality, your sex, your all this stuff, because the Wheel of 84, you're experiencing everything.
Well, what it is on this Wheel of 84, which comes to millions of lifetimes, you go through these ages. You go through the Golden Age, or Satya Yuga, which is 1,728,000 years. Then there's the Silver Age, where it becomes slightly less positive, and a slight amount of discord is introduced. Ancient Lemuria was the Golden Age, so it was a much more positive on Earth. Ancient Atlantis, there was more discord introduced. And then in Copper Age, it becomes half positive and half negative, and then finally Kali Yuga, which the age we're in now, maybe the golden part, I don't know.
So Sirius was a golden age.
Yes, so Sirius was a golden age.
Toward the end, or a little bit toward the end of the golden age.
So they had very long lifespans. They could live a number of thousands of years. And because of that, a lot of the students really took their time in terms of learning, because sometimes when a planet is in a golden age, there feels like there's no hurry, and it gives this profound illusion that you've already reached a very high level when maybe you've only been to the astral plane. So that was a big problem that the master had with a lot of the population and with his students, was that this sort of golden age apathy where they believed that they would reach a high level and just sort of hang out in the astral plane. So one of the things that we would do is we would meet regularly as a class every week, and God and Alan would be there. We knew each other. We were good friends back then. And
I was Gasheza was the name of him. Heather was a male in that incarnation, and I was a male, and I was a Chila, or a student of his, but I was also a initiate. I was on the path.
And we would study together. We'd all get into this room, and there was extremely high vibration feeling, like sparkling particles of light, or sort of like ocean air. And I'd open up the Shariat, which is the Book of the Masters, and it was really thick and big. It was like about 3 feet long and 2 feet wide.
I would imagine so.
Huge,
We were really big. We were tall.
I forgot to say that the Sirius people were roughly about 24 feet high total. So
Yeah,
Wow.
but we're translating everything into what I call series feet, So when we say it was that big,
Yeah.
it was actually much bigger. But
it was pretty big
relative to us.
to humans. And Sirius had an interesting and much more resilient anatomy. They had 2 hearts, and anyway, that's a long story. But in any case, I'd open up the chariot, and then the students would all study together about out-of-body travel and how to reach the state of this, reaching the states of the secrets of Jivan Mukti and God realization. So,
which is beyond.
Yeah, so the goals are, I would teach them about self-realization and God realization, which is to basically learn to consciously dwell in these much higher levels of heaven, like Alan was talking about, the soul plane, and the Anami Lok, which is the God plane.
That's the 10th plane. So the soul plane is the 5th, and the Anami Lok and above is the area of God realization, the 10th, 11th, and 12th, and beyond that.
And so what it is in every era there is always a living Barden Master. And when one Barden Master passes, then another Barden Master takes his place, and he gives souls this opportunity to graduate from the lower worlds of reincarnation.
May I say, did you want to hear a little bit about the technology and all that? I don't know if that's something.
Actually, I would like to save that. I'm just so digging this. Believe it or not, we have 2 minutes left.
Oh yeah.
Can we make this a part 2 and get you guys back really soon? That would just be beyond phenomenal.
It sounds fun to me.
We couldn't extend it another 10 minutes, could we?
I wish I could, but the problem is I only have an hour window before another show kicks in. Could you leave us with Could you leave us with a final thought from each of you quickly, because we're pushing time.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go first, Heather?
Oh, you can go.
Oh, final thought. Final thought would be, you have to be bold, adventurous, and cunning and resourceful. And you have to love God more than you love the things of this world if you want to have these experiences. And they can be achieved even by those who aren't bold. If you have this love in your heart for God, you can learn to be bold. But the love has to be something that's there.
And no matter how spiritually advanced that you feel, if they truly desire freedom, they can transcend their karma and transcend reincarnation and graduate from these worlds of time and space.
And become a conscious co-worker.
With God.
Which is the key.
Yeah.
I love the way you guys play off each other. It's phenomenal. I mean, y'all just chimed in and out. It was great. Heather and Alan, thank you. I'm blessed to have met you both, and you can bet I'm going to put these exercises into practice. And I will keep you posted on my progress, so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful to be on the air with you.
Yes, it was
enjoyed
wonderful.
it. Good
Always
interview.
stay in touch. That door is always open to you both.
Thank
Everyone,
you so much,
Heather
Steve.
and Alan, you can find more about their gorgeous, delicious work at soultravelagent.com. Keith Anthony Blanchard
actually,
here.
the Barden Cart website would be better.
Yeah,
Go again, give it out.
VARDANKAR.com.
One more time for me. Give it out.
Oh, VARDANKAR.com, and we're on YouTube as well.
Thank you, guys. Much appreciated. Everyone, Keith Anthony Blanchard, your host of Center of Light Radio, Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find me sitting here in this captain's chair conducting affairs of the heart, opening up that stargate so you can get back home to your divine parents, so you can be liberated. I look forward to seeing you. And next week, my guest is going to be, check this out, he returns, Jason Quitt. This guy is hot on the scene. He's an interdimensional time traveler, and he's very quick-witted. He knows his stuff. It's kind of like a part 2 of this show here, with a little different slant. I look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, when you have nothing to do at night, since you're laying there breathing, going to sleep, you might as well breathe on purpose, because when you do, something begins to happen. And that something is a profound, deafening silence. And in that silence is everything you can possibly imagine that you desire and deserve. I look forward to seeing you next week. Peace, love, and light.
Guess what, Hollywood? I'm here.
Hollywood's got a new host, and the stars are shining bright on